I'm Tim Moore from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin at Madison.
I'm Joe Stewart. I teach in the Political Science Department at Clemson University in South Carolina.
And I'm Jack Barlow. I teach at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. A lot of New Jersey students come to Pennsylvania to go to college. Just saying.
And you are?
Hello, my name is Abu Rashid. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hello, my name is Namai Sanakop. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, I'm Sia Muki. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, my name is Lucille Milligan. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, my name is Millie Tressler. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
I'm Joseph Ramnarine. I'm also a senior at East Brunswick High School. And we have our advisor, Mr. Brodman.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hey, good to see you, Alan.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jack.
Oh, I'm supposed to read the question. I'm sorry. The states sent delegates to the Philadelphia Convention to join in other states to, quote, devise and discuss all alterations and further provisions as may be necessary to render the federal constitution adequate to the exigencies of the Union. To what extent, if any, did delegates follow these instructions? What experiences of state governments under their new constitutions after independence have influenced the creation of the Constitution? Do decisions of the Supreme Court function as a continuing constitutional convention? Why or why not? You may begin.
On a holistic level, the delegates followed their instructions by rendering the federal constitution adequate to the exigencies of the Union. Their experience with the Articles government had proven that it was inadequate at governing the nation. George Washington described it as a half-starved, limping government that appears to be moving on crutches and is tottering at every step. They realized fairly quickly, as described by Professor Keith Doherty, that a new institutional design was the only long-term solution to the problems. This alteration was perceived as the most efficacious means of providing provisions which would render the new government adequate to the exigencies of the Union.
New Hampshire instructed its delegates to provide the ability to avert the dangers which threaten our existence, which was addressed in Article 1, Section 8's power to declare wars and fund an army. Virginia instructed its delegates to provide Congress the power to regulate interstate trade, which is found in the Commerce Clause. Addressing the near impossibility of amendments under the Articles, the framers created a system which made it easier to amend, but still required a supermajority.
Experiences under the state governments that influenced the creation of the Constitution include insufficient checks and balances, Shays' Rebellion, value of an executive, bicameral legislature, small districts which best represented the people, weakening of legislative supremacy and the embrace of checks and balances, importance of judiciary, disparity in voting requirements, and inability to regulate interstate commerce. The inability of Massachusetts to put down Shays' Rebellion by itself lends support for the inclusion of the capacity for a national military in the Constitution.
Pennsylvania did not have a singular executive, instead a council, whose disarray caused an inability to stop the Pennsylvania Mutiny of 1783. Most states had bicameral legislatures, which enhanced checks and balances because, according to James Wilson, the effects of mutual watchfulness, mutual control of both houses, will redound to the security and advantage of the state. The inability for states to regulate interstate trade left them open to taxation by adjoining states, as seen when New Jersey was described by Benjamin Franklin as a keg tapped at both ends, due to Pennsylvania and New York's imposition of tariffs.
For the most part, the US Supreme Court does not act as a constitutional convention, but rather interprets the document to reflect modern ideals when there is ambiguity in the Constitution's wording. With controversial issues, aspects of the polity can perceive the court's decision-making as similar to a constitutional convention due to the issue's sensitivity, as seen in cases like Roe v. Wade's recognition of a right of privacy for women to choose whether to have an abortion, or Noble v. Hodges' recognition of a fundamental right to same-sex marriage. In many instances, the court is reflecting the concept that the Constitution needs to be recognized defined through the prism of the current society. In Trope v. Doles, the court had recognized, in interpreting the Eighth Amendment and the capacity to revoke citizenship as punishment for a crime, that the amendment's scope is not static, and that courts must draw its meaning from evolving standards of decency.
The court can also be perceived as acting as a continuing constitutional convention when its decisions recognize concepts that are inherent in a particular branch's authority, as seen in Marbury v. Madison's recognition of the idea of judicial review as a power of the Supreme Court. This authority existed in other courts, but its assertion provided what Professor Jeffrey Hazard described as a broad claim of authority. In the end, we disagree with the question's premise, as we believe that they're acting as a Supreme Court should. They're interpreting a document over 200 years old in order to implement its underlying ideals and values in a modern world.
Thank you. Let me start out with a question about anti-federalists. During ratification, they looked backward and they had a lot of problems with the convention itself. They certainly had the problems with the document, but the convention itself, which of those critiques do you think is most effective?
I think that one of the most effective critiques that the Anti-Federalists lobbied towards the Constitutional Convention was the idea that the convention had been conducted under complete secrecy. Many Anti-Federalists, such as Robert Whitehill of Pennsylvania, believed that a secret convention would ultimately terminate in despotism, as the actions of a monarchy would usually be done under secrecy without the knowledge of the public. And for the most part, I believe that this evolution of belief that the government's actions of secrecy still continues to this day, as ultimately many people will remain skeptic whether government proceedings have been too disclosed to have been secret.
Another complaint that the Anti-Federalists lobbied against the Constitutional Convention in general that I find to be acceptable is the idea that the Constitutional Convention was put together in order to make amendments to the Articles of Government, not to create a new document entirety. Lansing Yates, in fact, left the convention because he felt that the convention wasn't going the way that it was supposed to. And in a way, the delegates maybe misled what was going on inside the convention to make them believe that they were amending the articles when in fact they then changed the entirety of the government.
You talk about a complaint for the Anti-Federalists would be secrecy, and you talk about the Supreme Court interpreting language. Are there problems there? I mean, how would the Anti-Federalists react to this? Because the Supreme Court's the most secretive of the branches of government.
I think that the Anti-Federalists would have had some issues with the way that the Supreme Court is functioning under secrecy today, specifically when justices do take more of a living constitution approach to interpreting the document. I think what helps is the written decisions that are available to the public after a decision has been made, because the logic that these justices use, the connections that they make to the modern or underlying ideals that we made are shown to the public, are available to better understand what is going on despite the secrecy within the branch. However, I agree that there would be some maybe minor complaints about secrecy under the Supreme Court.
With that said, judges do take more of an originalist approach. I think the Anti-Federalists really wouldn't have much of a problem because in these instances, judges are drawing their decisions directly from the Constitution. Like Lucy said, when there is more of a living document approach, you don't really know what went on in their minds and how they really came to the conclusion that they did.
Yeah, I agree with Joe's point. As Justice Breyer noted, the court should regard the Constitution as containing unwavering values that must be applied flexibly to ever-changing circumstances. So this emphasizes that it isn't really about the 18th century wording, but rather the ideals that are present in the Constitution that can be applied to modern issues today.
The only issue I see, though, is with that flexibility, the vague wording of the Constitution makes it very difficult to defend the Supreme Court, mainly for the fact that with an interpretation, with the justices that come in, it's up to them to make the decisions. And it's a lot of power to give to non-justices in order to make these kind of decisions for continuing government.
So give me a vague wording problem in your mind. And that's to everybody, not just Nimai.
I think one of the quintessential examples of vague wording within the Constitution is executive power found in Article 2, Section 1. It's never truly defined what exactly is the executive power being vested in the office of the president. Though the role of the president is clearly outlined, that specific phrase is not, and I think it has caused some issues because of its vagueness.
A clear example of executive action being misconstrued was when President Lyndon B. Johnson chose to use the Gulf of Tonkin resolution as justification for entering the Vietnam War. And to this day, we still see a number of complaints that the federal government's actions in the case of this war were out of bounds and ultimately out of reach with what the public desired.
So you mentioned Justice Breyer a minute ago saying that the Constitution has unvarying principles. I want to go back to the opening statement, right? You talked about the different charges that they had from different states and from the Confederation Congress. And Justice Breyer's unvarying principles are probably different from Justice Gorsuch's unvarying principles. So how do you resolve these conflicts when you've got a variety of things that you could be looking to, taking inspiration from?
I think an easy way to resolve these conflicts is, again, even though we are talking about the underlying ideals as a concept, we are taking these underlying ideals from the content of the Constitution itself. In terms of Roe v. Wade, we're looking at things like substantive due process, which is found explicitly within the 14th Amendment. So although that each justice, of course, has his own, may I finish my sentence?
Yeah.
Although each justice will, of course, have his or her own personal opinions, it is their duty, and I think they, in general, do a good job of representing what is found, the values that are found in the Constitution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'll start out if nobody objects.